Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 181 with Jesse Neptune. He is a rapper out of the East Providence area. And we talked about his upcoming project coming out in June, as well as why he got into music and all of that stuff. It was a really great podcast. You can check it out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. And if you like your podcast, you want to go search it on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at JM Carroll, and it should pop up for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at JM Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. As well as I need to plug for the month of May, I had on my good friend Mark Furtado, creator of the Artisan brand. We worked on a hoodie that's behind me. You'll see it throughout the podcast. It's a Mental Health Matters podcast hoodie with the front "Stay Kind to Your Mind" merch, and it's only available on his website for the month of May for Mental Health Awareness Month. It's a really great sweatshirt, really great quality sweatshirt, and I'll be plugging this for the next couple weeks as I do podcasts and stuff like that, and you'll see me sharing on social media. If you want a hoodie, go to his website, which he's tagged in all my stuff on social media as well, and it would be really great. He also donates 10% of his net profits to save the oceans and other charitable causes, so it's a really great cause to donate to, essentially, when you're buying the merch. So just wanted to plug that for you guys if you're interested. So what that does is bring us to today's episode 182 with Sam Greene.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I was really excited to get you onto this podcast, and we discovered some news that we'll talk about probably throughout the podcast. That was crazy coincidence. But how I like to open my podcast is kind of with a little bit of who you are and what you're doing currently.
So I'm a photographer in Cranston, Rhode Island, and it's called Zest and Zeal Studio. And I take portraits, family portraits, solo portraits. I'm working on doing some weddings. My last job, I was working with another photographer, and it was a fundraising event for people who have experienced domestic violence. So it was fundraising like for housing and just different resources. So that was super inspirational to see like their different stories and how they've overcome. And I got like emotional too, because like I've been through that too. So that was big. And yeah.
Yeah, and we'll dive into some of this stuff too as we progress, especially the photography as we get with later in the podcast. How I like to start my podcast though with diving into family dynamic, like I mentioned off the podcast.
Yeah.
And for any first-time listeners, I like to kind of explain why. And I always go with this cliche metaphor is basically when we talk about building houses, the foundation of our house is where we start. And in terms of our lives, it's our family dynamic, whether our family's together or not, for better or for worse, our family is where we start, because once you take that layer and you build on top of it, we get our life story and who we are as people. And it stems a lot from our childhood and our family. So with whatever you're comfortable with sharing, I'll allow you to kind of dive into your family dynamic.
Dope. Yeah. So I grew up in Johnston. Sometimes you could see the dump fumes from the landfill. It was really beautiful. And went to high school at Johnston High School, and then I decided I don't have any friends here, and I had an opportunity to go to Cranston West, so I decided to go to Cranston West. And I did a digital media program there where we did a lot of photography and like built websites and stuff like that. So that kind of helped me find my passion. and then I met a bunch of my friends who I'm still friends with now, and they're a bunch of creatives. Like my friend's a tattoo artist who I've known since high school. She did this one recently, and it's for my studio. It's got lemons and then a 24 because I just celebrated my 1 year having the studio, and lemons because zest in the name Zest and Seal. So I have this little guy, and that was super meaningful too because she's always been super supportive ever since high school. Um, so that was really cool. And yep, mom and dad, a dog, a cat. Still have my cat. His name's Weezer. um, and they had a salon in Cranston too, right near where my studio's at. So like I've always been around that area. So it's funny how life just becomes full circle sometimes because it's like Patuxent Village. Like I don't even consider that I grew up in Johnson. I feel like Patuxent Village was like that's my hood. Like that's my place. Because like I know everyone there, like everyone that like works in all the restaurants and stuff I'm super close with. For a while, like it took me a while to get my driver's license, so like I worked in like every single place over there. um, so I feel like everyone knows me. I know them. And it's just a great little community. I kind of think of like it's like Gilmore Girls, like that little community. Um, so my parents owned a salon, and it was in like this beautiful big yellow house, and um, we lived upstairs for a bit too. So we moved from Johnston, we moved to there. Um, and we lived upstairs, had this crazy landlord, this old British lady, and she would she was so mean to me. I don't know why I did nothing to her. She would just call me like she'd be like, "Oh, little bitch." I'm like, "What did I do to you?" And I think she was just, I don't know, jealous or something because I had such a great relationship with my parents and she didn't. And she said, "Oh, like my mother would always she shipped me to boarding school, and you have everything, blah blah blah." And I don't know. I wish the best for her, but she did not wish the best for me. Um, so that was a lot dealing with that and having to like quickly run down the stairs to get out of there and try to avoid her. And she had like her mom lived with her for a while too, and her mom had Alzheimer's, and I'd like bring up groceries, and she'd be like, "Oh, hello," like, and then I'd bring up another thing of groceries, and she'd be like, "Oh, hello again," like just like, but like forgetting she had seen me like already previously, like. So like she'd be like, "Hello again," and then I'd come up, and then she'd be like, "Darling, hello," and just it was just like a reintroduction every single time. Um, so she was just so cute. But her mom treated her awful, and she would yell at her for forgetting things all the time. Like she gave her credit card, and she's like, "How could you have lost that?" I'm like, "Girl, she's got Alzheimer's. Why would you give her your credit card?" Um, and it's just insane. And then she shipped her back to England. She's like a 90-year-old lady, and she just shipped her right back. But anyways, um, it was super awesome having that little salon space, but landlord, not so fun. Um, but I had a place to get my hair done, and um, like the girls down there were like my family too. Especially when I'd get ready for prom, and like it wasn't like you were just going to like a random salon. Like I was with my family. Like they felt like big sisters to me, and that took part in me growing up and becoming the person I am too. Um, and it was like kind of like little mini therapy session. So I'd get my hair done a lot. Um, and then my parents ended up divorcing. Closed. They uh, took parted ways. And we shut the salon down. And then I didn't have a place to live, so I lived with my boyfriend and his mom for a bit. Um, and now we have an apartment and everything's good, and but that was a lot for a while.
Yeah, if I want to, and if you don't want to answer this, is
Mm.
fine. With the divorce, at what point in your life did that happen?
Um, so it happened like after high school. I never went to college, so it was just it happened after high school when I had been with the guy for like a month. And and then I was like, "Hey, I need somewhere to live." And he was cool enough to like let me live, and like we're still together to this day. Um, and like 5 years ago, I think. But yeah, it was just like a shock to everyone because like my parents were so tight. But I recommend not going to into business with your partner. I don't know. I mean, it's different for every situation, but for them, like it caused like a lot of fighting and stress, and um, my dad like had quit his job to do this, and it was just like a lot of pressure on them from the beginning. And I mean, there's like great memories, but a lot of financial stress, and it took a lot on them. Um, and So they got a divorce, and now my mom's with this great guy, and my dad's with this great girl, and I love both of the partners. So it's like I have like a bonus family, so that's pretty cool. I like that. Um,
Yeah, and it seems like the fact that it happened a little bit later in life made it a
mhm.
little bit easier to cope with. Obviously, maybe the time
Yeah,
period of when it happened,
yeah,
being so early in a new relationship and having
hmm,
that bomb kind of dropped on and your
yeah,
family kind of going different paths. But
yeah,
based on what you're saying now, it seems like things have kind of settled out. Everything seems to be, for the most part, okay and
hmm,
good in that aspect. And like you said, you have like the two different families where you can kind of go to both sides and get different things from both
yeah. And I
people.
can get different perspectives from each side too. And there's no like hostility or anything. I mean, in the beginning, it was harsh. Like my parents were not in a good place with each other, and that was like, I felt like in the middle because they're telling me one thing, and then like I'd hear another thing from the other side. I'm like, Switzerland. Like, um but you just kind of gotta, sometimes I just have to be like, hey, like I'm not like I have to have boundaries too, and say I'm not comfortable talking with you about my mom, vice versa, or dad. So I'd have to like set boundaries for myself a lot.
Yeah, that's super important to
Yeah.
be able to set boundaries, especially
Mhm.
with our parents, because there's some things that they might want to express to you, especially being their daughter and being the
Mhm.
person that they, at this point, care for and trust the most in
Mhm.
such a vulnerable time in their lives. But the relationship between a parent and a child is very delicate, where
Yeah.
there's certain things that might not be so appropriate to
Mhm.
share with children because it isn't their cross to bear almost,
Mhm.
like it's not your responsibility to help them navigate certain trauma, certain disputes, or certain
Mhm.
things that they're going through. And I can also understand the parent side of things where you, as especially with your children as they get older, you feel like you could trust them with a little bit more,
Yeah.
and you also see them in a different light where it's like that's a person too. Like
Mhm.
they might be able to handle this. They're like me. They have similar mindsets. Obviously, we share genetics and all that stuff, but you could you feel like you could probably trust them with certain information, but that relationship between parent and child, when you cross certain boundaries, becomes difficult to navigate where it's like this isn't a conversation that's appropriate to have with
Mhm.
me as your child. And I think a lot of people go through that struggle. It's like
Yeah.
figuring out what to share with their parents too, and vice versa with parents sharing back to
Mhm.
their children. Is like, how much do I really want to
Yeah.
tell them about what's going on in my life? Because it does cross those lines where things can get a little bit more dicey and a little bit
Mhm.
more controversial, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's navigating that, and I think it's really great for you to be able to be like, no, this is my boundary, and I don't feel comfortable
Mhm.
having this discussion with you. And that's a testament to character right there, to
Yeah.
being willing to establish those, because
Mhm.
establishing boundaries is difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, it took me a while too, cause like, I want them to be able to vent, and talk about what they're going through, but I'm aware of my mental health and how much I can take, and that's taken a while to get there, but it's if I'm feeling uncomfortable, I have to express that. I can't just hold it in because then it's just gonna yeah.
100%. And that's a huge thing with a lot of people is like understanding their own mental health and what
Mhm,
they're comfortable with dealing with.
mhm.
And like it's like obviously you care about them and you want to support them, but it's also you got to care for yourself too and like protect your own stuff, especially when we're talking about our parents, we look up to them. Like I'm supposed to be looking up to you in this aspect. So when you're coming to me, it almost messes with that like almost stereotypical, I guess, like relationship that we create in our minds,
Yeah.
especially we get through our culture of what our parents are to us. So
Mhm.
when that version gets a little distorted or disrupted and they're coming to you for help or guidance, it becomes sometimes difficult to navigate that for a lot of people. And working through that is a difficult thing, but it's impressive to be able to navigate it. It seems like the way that you have
Mhm.
to figure things out. And I'm not saying we're all perfect people trying to
Yeah.
navigate this. Mental health is always a difficult thing to navigate. And it's a lifelong thing. Just like
Mhm.
physical health or emotional health, mental health is just as important as those other things as well. As we're building on the conversation, you brought up the salon and stuff like that
Mhm.
too. Talk to me a little bit about like your childhood and stuff like that, and whether it's activities or hobbies or maybe even the salon where you were kind of allowed to kind of, like you said, vent or express yourself or
Mhm.
make friends. And I'd like to hear more about that type of stuff.
Yeah, so I did theater as a kid, like a big theater nerd. Um, and I mean, I was always just like in the ensemble, but it was always fun and it was like just great connecting with that kind of group. Um,
Any specific type of plays or stuff that you were involved in that you enjoyed?
we did Pippin. That was fun. I mean, I wore like a I felt like I don't know, it was like an aluminum like bowl like on my head for a scene. I don't know what scene this was. Like we weren't in space. um, but that's like something weird I remember. But yeah, it was like a good experience too, just getting on stage in front of people. And I mainly did it too because of like film camp. Because in film camp we sounds so nerdy too. I went to film camp. Because in film camp, we did like a theater side too, where we would get on stage and do like something, and then we would show like our film and what we made. So it was like a theater and a film part of the program. That's where I met like all my weirdos and a lot of my friends. Uh, we'd always make these really strange films and make our parents sit through them. And they'd be like, wow, amazing. Like this one was like called The Sound and it was about like this like ringing noise and whenever you heard it you would just like go no and just fall to the ground. That's where I got my love for filming. Well, for a while I thought I would like be like a filmmaker and like I would like write these scripts and stuff, and then there was just like a lot of work that went into that, and uh I wanted to go to college for it, and then just like through after like my family's divorce, I was like, I don't know, and my self confidence was like going like not because of the divorce, just like in general, like as I was like, what do I want to do, or like, can I actually make a living from this? And then like I always loved photography, but I'm like, I don't know, like if I'm actually like you get in your head, I'm sure you have to like, oh, am I actually good enough to do this? Um, so like I'm just like a master overthinker. Um, Yeah, I did theater, and I was in this digital media program where I met my best friend Teddy, and we would like do like these graphics and just like make memes. And um, our teacher just didn't know they were memes. She'd be like, "Wow, that's really good," and it was just this awful picture of like Sonic or something. Like, thank you. And like he's actually like a very talented artist. So it was just funny. We should like hang them up on the wall. um so just like big like nerdy aspect and like just nothing that I would get if I stayed in Johnston. Like I know I was bullied a lot in Johnston and I just glad I got away from that. um Yeah, I struggled with my mental health a lot in high school. I went the first time going to therapy wasn't great. It was like I was telling my mom I was struggling, and she's like, "Okay, let's find you a therapist." I don't know. She found this like bootleg therapist. Took me to like it was like a basement in her house, and I like specifically remember there was like a bunch of like rubber ducks for whatever reason. Like she was obsessed with them, and they were like all over the wall. And at the time, I wasn't going through like any family struggles, but she was like, "Talk to me about your family," like, right into it, like, kinda like you, but not but in a therapy session, it's a little different, like, she just kept saying, "Oh, the problems with your family, the problems with your family." I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, "I think it's with the guy I'm with who's, like, doing all this stuff to me." And she's like, "Let's talk more about your family." I'm like, "Okay, let's move on." And you're not supposed to force conversations on people in therapy, and that's exactly what she was doing. Then I went to another therapist, and they're like, "All right, I just had so many bad therapy experiences," but she's like, "All right, so you feel anxiety, you feel depression, take all the bad stuff and just throw it out a window. Pretend you're in a car and just throw it out the window." I'm like, "What's that easy? Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, just throw it out a window. Yeah, I'm fixed." um, but then I found more resources, and I mean, it's still a struggle every day, and Zoloft's helped me a lot. Shout out Zoloft. Um, and medication's like been a huge help, and it's definitely helped me with it's like a whole new world now. Because before, like, I don't even know if I would have been able to do this before. I would have just shut down. You would just be staring at me being quiet. um, but where were we again?
Well, I'll go off that point because we're going through like the
Yeah,
progression, and we'll dive into some of that media stuff as well
yeah.
with the theater things in a second. But
Uh-huh.
the talking point about therapy is, I think, a valuable one because
Mhm.
I've gone to therapy, and I've talked a lot about therapy on this podcast and the resources that are out there and the value of therapy. Especially, I always specifically say for men to go to therapy because a lot of us will hear the words "you need to go to therapy" and be like,
Mhm.
"No, we're not doing
I
that."
mean, I feel like even if you don't have like a specific issue or something, I think it's good for everyone to go to therapy. Like just to talk to somebody is great. That's just my view on it too.
Yeah,
But
just getting out the bullshit is helpful.
yeah.
And like where my opinion on therapy has like developed and changed a little bit, where it's like I've heard enough people talk about what's therapeutic for them
Hmm.
in terms, some people it's the gym, some people it's church, some people could be their friends like going out getting a drink together 'cause they're
Hmm.
not like a super social person and that's their therapy.
Yeah.
Um but I don't think true genuine therapy with a great therapist can be replaced.
Hmm.
Like, sure, the gym can be very beneficial. Sure, hanging out with your friends can be very beneficial. Sure, your religion or faith might be very beneficial. But when you're under the guidance of a true practiced and professional to guide you through what you're going through
Hmm.
mentally, there's nothing like that when you have the right person guiding you.
Yeah.
Because there are bad therapists, like you've said, where
Hmm.
they keep hammering on certain points and keep going through that. And I've experienced that recently where they just kept throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I
Hmm.
don't think that's a great method for therapy. I know that's part of it is they're trying to see, they go to almost to the extreme to see if this is like, this shoe fits. Does this shoe fit? Does this
Hmm.
shoe fit? And I understand they don't know you and they're trying to figure out where the boundaries are with
Hmm.
you at the same time. But I think there's a more delicate way if you just listen to the person
Yeah.
versus assuming to the maximum what they're going through. Because when I felt like they were kind of putting me in this box that I wasn't, I'm like, I don't agree with that. And they almost want you to push back to see where it is. And some people might not be confident enough, especially in that state, to push back on their therapist. Be
Yeah.
like, no, that doesn't fit me. And that's a difficult thing to navigate with the whole industry of therapy or anything with psychology or any of that thing or
Hmm.
mental health, I should say, related, is figuring out where you fit in that box, because it is a spectrum with
Yeah,
mental
and like
health.
nobody wants to be put to a specific box, you know? Like everyone's their own person, and there's, boxes that pile up and become other boxes, and then you're just like the person I am now might not be the same person I am like 2, 3 years from now. So like don't put me in a box, man. That's what I feel like some therapists do too. Like they're just so like aimed on finding what's wrong with you, not necessarily like fixing you, but like finding that root. Like there just can be so many different things involved in that and in that person. Like it's not always just one specific pinpoint, you know?
Yeah, it's rare that it's usually just one specific thing. It's usually a
Yeah.
culmination of different
Mhm.
things that happen through someone's
Mhm.
life, and it would take multiple sessions sometimes to navigate all the different parts. And it's like, I remember even just going to like a first therapy session with the new therapist, because my old therapist, she was fantastic. I loved her
Mhm.
to death. Like, she helped me through the 2020 era of going through stuff and
Oh, yeah, it's prime
navigating.
time.
Yeah, it was prime time, and it was my first true therapy experience. And
Mhm.
she taught me many coping mechanisms and many things that I still use to this day that I'm extremely beneficial for. And I also
Mhm.
went in with a mindset of like, I need to learn better coping skills.
Yeah.
And I would ask for worksheets, or like I
Mhm.
treated it like school almost.
Mhm.
Like, I want to learn stuff. I want to be better.
Yeah,
And
I had a CBT, like,
mhm,
worksheets that I'd do, like, just to help me, like, oh, like, my brain would usually think, like, "Oh, the situation's blah, blah, blah," but, like, there's, other ways to think about it. Like, you can kind of trick your brain into thinking about it in a more positive light, which, takes time. It's not just, like, a super easy fix, but that's kind of what those worksheets helped me with.
yeah, it's exactly the type of therapy that I was doing at that
Yeah,
time. And
yeah,
yeah, that was really beneficial, I thought. And um, because there's times where in therapy I just want to just say stuff and just get it out there, and
yeah.
like that's where it's like very valuable to have a place where you could just like jokingly calling reference to your DM word vomiting in your
Yeah.
therapist's office.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
what I
super
said
good.
I would do, I'm like, "Just letting you know, I might just be a bunch of word vomit."
But it's like that space is like super valuable to have that, to just kind of let stuff out there, because you
Mhm.
never know um, where those therapy sessions are going to take you, or where what you're going to get out of them until you're actually in them. So it's great to hear that you found different therapists or different things that have worked within the mental health
Yeah.
realm. Um, Getting back to the conversation a little bit, was talking about the digital media, talking about the theater aspect. Have you always just been drawn to this creative aspect of yourself?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I was never good with, like, math or science, but, I was always great with art, and, like, I love painting and stuff too. Just anything creative that I can use to express myself, and that's kinda like a therapy within itself too, um, being able to express myself with my art. Um, so yeah, I did a lot of theater, and like I ended up doing like a few photography jobs too in high school, which helped me kind of like build my confidence up a bit and kind of find my style. And then after high school, um
Yeah, let's. I want to dive into that too now. It's like that
yeah,
after high school period and all that stuff. You can go there
yeah,
now. Yeah.
yeah. Um yeah, just it took me a while to like find my niche. I don't know. But yeah, digital media was great, and I learned a lot from that. And I did wanna go to college, but, like, with the divorce happening and everything, I like, not saying that's the complete reason, I also, like, wasn't completely sure on what I wanted to do, and I didn't wanna have, like, a bunch of student loans, like, weighing on me while I'm, like, trying to figure that out. So I was like, "Oh, let me figure it out first and then go," and, that still didn't happen. So, um, but yeah, now I'm like working at like a daycare and just trying to like build my photography business. And I mean, like, I'm only like 1 year out, having like an official LLC, but I mean, it can only go up from here. I'm hoping. Um, yeah.
Did you feel pressured to go to college during that time period,
Um,
whether it's school or family or any of that?
I mean, like, I had like one teacher, like she was going around the room asking where everyone was going to college, which I thought was extremely inappropriate because everyone's on their own path and everyone's feeling pressure. Like, I mean, everyone feels pressure in that age too, but for like not just school, just anything, like finding out who they are is pressure enough. Um, but yeah, she went around the room asking like where everyone was going to college, and both me and my friend Vita, we both weren't planning on going to college, and um, she she went to me and I said, "Oh, like I'm gonna wait." And she's like, "Oh, you really shouldn't do that." Like in front of the whole class, which was awful. And I was like, well, I just want to figure myself out first for a little. Like none of her business. Like I could have said nothing and that would have been fine, but I felt like the need to defend myself. Um so yeah, she made a mark on that, and I also like because of like depression and anxiety, I didn't have like the best grades too. And my guidance counselor too was kind of just like gave up on me because I still wanted to know like info about like what schools I could get into, and I said like I didn't want to go to college right away, and then she just like completely cut me off and went to like the kids that were like going to college right away. So like I only really had a meeting with her once. um yeah, you do get kind of separated from the kids that are pursuing what they want right away. So I did feel like a little bit of pressure from that, and I felt like, oh, maybe like I need to, and it got to a point where it was just like too late. Um, so I worked like restaurant jobs, tried to figure it out, saved money. I was thinking I was gonna go to New York and figure it out from there. Like any creatives, like oh, like let me go to New York, let me go to LA. That's where it is. Um, and then I like created just such a great community where I was, and um, now I have a studio, and I started out like little home studio, like from my little apartment, and I have like a little tiny office, and like have people go from there, and I just hope they weren't allergic to cats because I'm not gonna move my cat every time. um, so like I'd have like a few clients come in for that. I mean, at the start, I just use like my friends as models. Like you just kind of got to do what you got to do at the start. Um, and then I'd like made a website and put my friends on the website and just kind of tried to grow from there. And then I found that people actually liked what I was doing, and then I'm like, okay, maybe I can do this. Um, so then it's grown from that little space in my apartment to now a studio, which you know where it is.
Yeah, it's crazy for the listeners. Her studio is located, if we want to flash back to episode 2 with my grandfather, his art and soul shop used to be located in that same place, and my grandparents, obviously grandfather has passed, my grandma sold the business, and now you are located in that place, and
Mm,
didn't know that prior. So
yeah.
like
Yeah,
things work in
you were giving
mysterious
me your
ways.
little backstory, and, when you said art and so I'm like, "One in Cranston? That's where I'm at." So that's wild. Yeah. She's, like, such a sweet lady too.
She loved what she was doing, and
Yeah.
like you could tell she really cared about putting on local artists, and like I think she probably got a lot of value from selling the studio to you guys, especially for
Yeah.
being creatives. Like
Mhm.
that probably made her feel really happy knowing
Mhm.
that it was going to something good.
Yeah. Um, I w she had, like, a little I don't know if it was, like, kind of like a closing party, but, we went to that, and she was, like, so excited just to show me everything, and, um she was so excited too when I told her it was gonna be a photography studio, and she showed me, some work from, like, a local artist too who went to RISD, and she was just super excited to show me all those portraits and, like, the story behind that, and that was just super inspiring too, and I'm like, "I really gotta make this place great now." Um, and, uh, that's why I wanna make my like, I don't wanna just be, like, the stereotypical photographer who's just, like, like a commercial photographer. I don't wanna be that. I wanna be somebody who like shows art in their photography. It's not just like those classic like portraits or whatever. Like it's like there's some kind of like I want to like kind of be apart from the rest of the photography community, and I mean that's kind of what every creative wants, but I just see a lot of like the same shots sometimes, and I just want to be different from that. But it's like it's hard to stray away from that when like trends are p- like constantly on social media going down your throat, and you're like, oh well, this works for this person, so maybe I should be doing that. But you have to think about what you want to. Um, so that's tough to navigate because I'm like, oh well, I've been doing it this way for so long, but maybe I need to do it a different way because like this influencer is telling me like that I need to. But you got to listen to yourself sometimes. And
Yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Listening to your voice is super important. And
Mhm.
we were talking off podcast about when I first started and like listening to my voice and getting used to my voice.
Yeah.
And like, you got to believe what you're saying and
Mhm.
believe your content essentially.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is no one else is going to buy into what you do until you
Mhm.
start buying into what you do.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more you work on it, the more you create over time,
Mhm.
people will see the vision. And trying to separate yourself from other creators is difficult
Mhm.
because you gain inspiration probably from different people when you started. It's like, oh, I could probably
Mhm.
do stuff like this, or I could do a podcast like this.
Mhm.
And you don't want to become them. So that's the hardest thing, is to take the inspiration but make it your own thing. It's like,
Mhm.
how do you become authentic when there's so many different people doing so many different things, and you don't want to copy them, but you don't even know you could be copy them, and you're just
Yeah.
doing your
You
thing.
could just be like, I was inspired.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so to turn that and keep creating is a
Uh-huh.
difficult task nowadays because
Mhm.
everyone is so creative and everyone's at least trying to be creative. I shouldn't say
Yeah.
everyone's creative.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to be
Everyone's
creative.
so creative.
Everyone's trying to find their voice or their unique content or their unique artwork, and
Uh-huh.
it's a difficult time period to navigate because we have so many different resources nowadays.
Mhm.
So like, what are some of the ways that you've been able to kind of navigate this? Because I know you're saying how difficult it is. Um, how do you incorporate things you like, but also there's a aspect where you probably have to do some of these shots because I mean they bring in the income a little bit and they
Mhm.
bring in some of the finance
Yes,
aspects. So
yep.
like, how do you balance that between doing stuff that you kind of need to do essentially, but with things that you want to do?
Well, I mean, it always depends on the client too, because sometimes they want those like stereotypical kind of shots, which is fine, whatever. Like I love doing like anything, like any project, but I always like kind of put my own spin in things. And um like why I named it like Zest and Zeal is because like zest is kind of like a passion, and I try to express my passion, try to see like my clients' passion for like themselves and what they're doing, and I try to explore that too, and I'll try to talk to them and like kind of figure out more who they are as a person. Because I don't like to just go into it and be like, all right, let's shoot. I like to find out who they are, and then try to have conversations and like even shoot sometimes while I'm having conversations so that I can get like just like their natural smile so that everything's not so posed. Like my favorites like are like those good candid shots. And zeal just because it's like an enthusiasm, and same thing, kind of like passion, enthusiasm. Um, so it's just I like to find those little moments when they can kind of like like be free and can kind of be themselves, and I kind of capture that, or I try to capture that within the session. So and then I try to throw in like different creative aspects with like whether it's lights or props, and like of like these old vintage phones, and I try to set up my studio like a little bit differently too, and I just try to get like just them being as natural as possible. And I recently did this photo shoot with um, this woman, and uh, she like gave me this great review. She posted it on her Instagram, and she said, "Oh, like I've never received photos like this before. I'm so happy. Like I called my friends and family. Like I've never felt this good about myself." And she just loves like she said like she's never like she wanted to reach out to me because of the diversity in my art, because I have so many different people. It's not like all those like like it's like everyday people, and you're not getting like, I'm not just posting on Instagram like those like um I don't know, like stereotypical beauty models. I don't know. Like I'm posting like everyone, like every shoot I do, I try to post because I find beauty in like every single session I do and in every person that I shoot. So I try to post as much as I can and not just try to filter out what's like aesthetically beautiful. Um, so that's just kind of where I'm trying to lead in with my art, with more like my heart, as corny as that sounds, um, than just like what's popular. And um, I realized like that's what I do. Well, that's why I do what I do. When she left me that review, I like to make people feel confident, and I like to make people feel like their pictures or something that is like another expression of themselves.
You know what's cool is as you're talking about this,
Mhm.
this is. Do you remember when I was telling you off podcast when we get towards like when we start talking about passions
Yeah.
and how people get super more excited to talk about and more into
And
it,
here I am.
and here we are. And the way that you said that you actually talk to the person and you
Uh-huh.
try to catch them in their like authentic self,
Mhm.
that moment is exactly the same thing I do on a podcast. You catch it in photography, I catch it in the podcast
Yeah.
form. And I think that right there is the perfect example of why I try to go for different people on the podcast
Mhm.
and getting those moments, because when you're hearing people talk about what they do, they light up differently.
Mhm.
And to get to that, we obviously I like to build the story and go through your life and stuff like that to get to that point to where it makes sense. And when you see someone talk about what they do, it's so inspiring because they love that shit. You could tell they're
Mhm.
so into it, and it's like that's like the thing that people need to see more of is people
Mhm.
talking about what they love to
Mhm.
actually do instead of just like talking about gossip or drama or fucking stocks or whatever. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like just like hear people talk about why they do what they do is the coolest thing because
Mhm.
everyone has different reasons for why they do what they
Especially
do.
from just everyday people, 'cause everyone's just so different, and I'm sick of hearing the same people over and over talk about the same things over and over, so I love what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that was always the kind of the goal was to get similar into your business is include everyone. Reach to those
Mhm.
people that aren't the stereotypical forms of beauty essentially
Yeah.
and get to
Not that
them.
there's anything wrong with those people, by the way,
Well, they've
like,
had their no they've had
everyone's got
enough.
yeah, we're done with you.
But it's like I agree, it's like there's nothing wrong with those types of people, but everyone deserves their shine, essentially, is
Yeah.
what we're trying to say
Everyone
here.
deserves a spotlight.
And I think creators like ourselves are trying to do it in our own way.
Mhm.
Like, we have different, obviously, businesses, but essentially we're doing the same thing in
Yeah,
different ways,
I
which is
agree.
like the coolest thing in the world, especially
It's a Carroll connection.
that's the that was always the mindset is creating a new connection. And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
obviously we had the underlying like crazy part of just like the studio that you're in now. Like
Yeah,
that's
right?
like
Mind blowing,
it's
like,
crazy.
this was meant to be
It's
somehow,
literally
yeah.
it's crazy how that type of stuff will manifest itself and work
Yeah.
out. And it's I can't think of the fucking uh theory or TikTok thing. It's not like the string theory, but it's like a kind of essentially like that is like we've kind of crossed paths in that sense, but
Yeah.
we didn't. Like we've been in the same places, but like
Mhm.
it's just weird to see that and have the influence of the creative nature of it. And
Yeah.
like to each have different conversations. Like obviously you're talking to my grandmother from like you're purchasing her studio
Mhm.
and I talked to her about like the podcast or my grandfather and stuff like that. And I
Mhm.
still talk to her about the business and how she truly loved getting the background of why people were creating the art they were creating and giving those
Mhm.
spotlights to the local people and seeing that type of stuff, seeing the stuff that you do and trying to emulate that type of creative nature in my
Mhm.
podcast is important to me because like you have tons of stuff on social media, tons of stuff that probably shouldn't even be having likes and views, just a bunch of junk out there.
Mhm.
And you have creatives like ourselves scratching clawing to try to get
Like, we're just
recognition.
trying to be authentic.
Yeah, it's and you know what's the crazy part? I always say this is like if I made a podcast about gossip and drama and all that negative talk, I could have probably one of the best podcasts in the world.
Yeah.
But I don't ever want this platform to become that,
hmm
because there's enough of that.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to go hear people talk about like random rap beef or fucking politics or fucking anything that's going on in the social media realm,
hmm
there's plenty of content creators out there. Go
Yeah, we
listen
have
to them.
enough of them.
Like, if you want to hear about Sam Greene talk about her art and her creative photography, here we are on the
hmm
podcast. Or if you want to hear last week's episode with Jesse Neptune talking about his music, go listen to that episode. Or if you want to go all the way back to hear my episode 2 with my late grandfather talking about why he did what he did and why he loved his life and his wife and his children and his grandchildren, listen to that episode, because every single person has something different to offer,
hmm
and all it takes is just one person to ask why.
It's just cool to get to know people too.
It's rare to sit down with someone for 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours and just talk to people.
Yeah.
Like,
And people don't do that a lot nowadays
no,
too.
it's different. It's like social media came into play, and
Mhm.
especially you throw COVID and all that stuff in there.
Yeah.
And
And everyone's just socially awkward now.
yeah, it's no one knows how to conversate and talk
Yeah.
about things without making it awkward. It's like,
Mhm.
well, one, awkwardness is part of conversations. Like,
Yeah.
there's going to be awkward moments in a podcast, going to be
Mhm.
awkward moments when you're talking to someone. You can make it less awkward,
Mhm.
but it's still going to be some awkwardness. That's
Yeah.
just part of it, especially when, at least for us, like, I didn't know you prior to this.
Yeah.
Like, it's getting to know you and then interviewing at the same time. But even when I have people that I know and I know all the stuff,
Mhm.
there's still going to be some sense of awkwardness trying to
Yeah, 'cause you don't
navigate that
usually talk to
conversation.
people like this,
Yeah,
in
exactly.
like in an interview style way.
Yeah. And it's like, you have to like kind of navigate it properly, and
Yeah.
like the way that you talk about trying to navigate to your authentic self, you have to navigate the conversation to get to their authentic person.
Mhm.
And I said this last week, is like, you have to like talk to the guest in their quote unquote native language. In the sense, I mean, like, how you talk, how you perceive things, how you receive things. Like,
Mhm.
I have to learn how to speak that language and then speak that almost to you to try to get the most authentic version of yourself. Because if I just speak the same way to every single person, I might not get the best interview out of them. And I want to
Yeah.
talk to them in a way that they'll be able to articulate themselves the best and be the most comfortable. And
Mhm.
you have to adapt to each conversation, because like we said in the beginning and throughout the podcast, every person is different and every conversation is going to be different. So if you go in, like, yeah, the script that I have is the same
Yeah.
script for the
Yeah.
podcast. That's for consistency aspects, but I use that and then adapt to the person, seeing what they're comfortable with, seeing
Mhm.
where the conversation can grow, seeing where they really want to express themselves. And now we're at that back end where that stuff about the photography and all this stuff is coming to light, and you really get to see yourself shine. And I think that's like the beautiful aspect of a
And I'm sure
podcast.
you love seeing people talk about their passions
Oh, you
and
see it
yeah.
immediately, the change, like, from being a little nervous in the
Yeah.
beginning to like
Yeah.
really starting to open up about your craft. Like,
Starting
it's
with like, tell me all about your family, tell me all about your childhood, and now
it's like, here we
yeah,
are. And
here
it's
we are.
like, now you get to see the full progression of why it gets to this
Mhm.
point. In terms of the photography though,
Mhm.
like, how do you navigate the social media aspect of it? Because that is a very difficult
Ugh.
thing.
It's just I'm like constantly fighting with the algorithm, and I don't I don't know. Like I try to follow as many people as I can too. That seems to help. And then people be like, "Oh, like reach out for me." Like after I follow them, and I'm like, you're the 100th person I've followed today. Hello. um, but yeah, it's just about networking too, even outside of social media. Like I do like um last social event I went to was called it's like She Leads, and it was a bunch of women talking about their business experiences and how they've come to be and how they work through their own self-confidence or lack of, and that was super inspirational. So they invited me to have a booth there and then also like take photos and socialize. So that was big, but it's tough, like just doing just social media. Like I don't think I could uh ever get business from. I mean, I could, but it's great just talking to people one on one and like actually like showing what I telling people what I want to do with their session, or like what you said, like I light up when I talk about my photography and what I'm passionate about, and like I need other people to see that. Maybe I should just start a podcast. um, and but just social media in general. And then like I'm always concerned because I see like all these other photographers with like a bunch of likes. Not that like I'm like feeling competitive or anything, because like I'm rooting for them too. But like I want to get to that point, but also like why do I care so much? Why do I care so much about likes? Like it's just a click of a button. Like it that shouldn't define you. Like your amount of like shouldn't define how good you are. But yet we've gotten to that point in society where I feel like it does, or people only see the value in your work if it's also correlated with how many likes you have on social media or whatever you use. Um, so it's hard to navigate through that, especially like again with the aesthetics and people like just posting what looks nice on their page, and I want to like try to post as much as I can, but um yeah, social media is tough to navigate.
Yeah, the like aspect of it has become a social like currency almost,
Yeah,
where
right.
people will trade anything for likes, and
Yeah,
it's
people
crazy.
will buy likes.
Yeah, people buy follows, all that stuff. It's
Yeah,
like
and you can purchase like the blue check mark now too. Like I'm like I've actually considered that once, and I'm like that's so fake. What? No, I'm not gonna pay money to have a little tiny blue check mark, but people do like tend to follow you if you have that little blue check. It's wild.
it's if there's actual, and I haven't looked into this, is if there's like legit like benefits to having a blue check, like if there's analytics or certain
Yeah,
algorithm benefits or
yeah,
whatever, then maybe it's worth considering.
yeah,
But if it's literally just the blue check, and that's crazy. But people will pay for it because
yeah.
social their image on social media matters.
Mhm.
And for us to, if we sit here and say it doesn't, it is a little crazy because our society is included that now,
Yeah.
where I look at it as it's a resume essentially.
Mhm.
Like if you're not using social media, you're like playing on defense almost. You have to defend a lot of different things, and you're playing from behind essentially, I should say, because you're going to have to do a lot of different catch up to reach those people on social media, because the reach that social media does have is worth everything.
Mhm.
Because
Like,
I
I've
mean,
gotten so many jobs just from social media, so, like, I'm not trying to diss social media or anything, like, it's gotten me, like especially Instagram too, has gotten me, like, 70-80% of my jobs, like, crazy. And that's yeah, like what you were saying, like, it's your portfolio, like, I don't even like, I've worked so fucking hard on my website, and I feel like people don't even go to that, they just go to my Instagram, but
yeah, that's part of the reason I've never invested. For me, like it makes sense for what you do, but
yeah.
um, for myself to have a website, like I've never, like I have my podcast website,
Mhm.
where it's just like a host site where you can listen to it. But creating a website, I mean, eventually, if I want to get to those levels, I could probably and should probably do that.
Mhm.
But uh, it's the clips on Instagram, it's the clips on TikTok,
Mhm.
it's the YouTube videos I'll share on Facebook. It's like people see the stuff on social media versus like obviously my content is a little bit different, where it's like driven through social media versus if you just created photography, you could print photos and people would hang it on their house. Like it's
Yeah.
there's that aspect of it where if social media disappeared, you still have a business.
Mhm.
And mine would have to be way different. It'd have to go almost towards like old school TV, where I probably would never get the chance to do that. Where
Yeah.
nowadays, like because of social media, because of things like YouTube and stuff like that,
Mhm.
I'm able to have something like this, and vice versa, allow you to come on the platform and plug it and talk about it. And I think
Mhm.
that's like a cool thing of social media. Obviously, there's a ton of negatives, but
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of benefits that we do overlook sometimes in society because of so many negatives that there
Mhm.
are. But when you use social media as a tool for your benefit, I think it's worth it, but not allowing yourself to get caught up in the likes and stuff is
Exactly.
important, and
Yeah.
it's
And
hard.
that's super tough.
Yeah, because you just see everyone online, like you said, there is a competitive nature to it,
Yeah.
but like you want them to succeed, but
Mhm.
like you want to succeed
Yeah.
too. It's like it's this
It's like,
weird.
"How'd you get like that? Tell me a secret."
And it's like it's comparison's the thief of joy, but comparison also drives a lot of competition and motivating
Uh-huh.
factors. Like it's two sides to every coin. Like
Mhm.
yeah, it's not good to compare yourself, but being able to compare yourself to others will allow you to evaluate where you need to get better and
Yeah,
where you could
exactly.
grow. So I think
Mhm.
there's benefits to both sides of those things. In terms of the photography aspect, what do you think is going to be the next steps for you as you continue your journey into more years? And obviously, you said first full year at the studio and progressing
Mhm.
with that. What's kind of the future plans that you have for yourself?
So a lot of it's like mini sessions seem to do well too, like because people can just book right from there and like get quick, like 15-minute sessions, and it doesn't have to be like a whole hour long session. Um, that's hard for me like to learn to navigate too, because I'm just like I like to take my time with sessions, get to know the person, like I said, and it's hard to do in like a 15-minute time slot. Um, but, like, doing, like, little mini sessions, especially, like, during the holiday or, for spring, I did, like, Wicked Tulips, mini sessions, which was super awesome. But yeah, just quick, like, 15-minute sessions. And, um, I plan on working with my mom a lot because my mom owns, a little studio space in front. So, like, I have the studio space in the back, and she does makeup and hair, so we've been able to kind of, like, combine our businesses and, like, work together, and people eat that shit up. They love, like, mom and duo aspects, and we both look the same. We're both, like, just as short, blonde-haired, and, um, we're just, like, the perfect little duo. But it's cool to see, like, how she's grown, like, after her divorce, and, she had to start like, she had the salon and then nothing, and she had to start from, like, the ground up, essentially, and, um, I was also starting from, like, the ground up, and we both just kinda, like, tried to hype each other up as much as possible. Sorry, I think my chin just touched the
Yeah.
mic. Um so it's been very helpful trying to build ourselves up both like mentally and um within our businesses, and just trying to um work together, and then we can both kind of bring people different people in, and by working together like I've she's like she used to like help me get clients, now I'm helping her get clients, and she's like, look at you, and I'm like, look at you. But yeah, it's just been super inspirational, and like it's not like we've ever like had help or anything from like we've always just like the salon was a big help, um because I got clients from there, like I made different connections from there, and then she didn't have that anymore, and I didn't have that kind of connection anymore, and I wasn't even living in that area where it like was my little home. And now I'm like full circle. Now we're back there in the village and Tuxa village, and now we're working like side by side, which is pretty cool. And um it's just like cool to see that like nothing like brought her down. Like she's still doing what she want. Like before she was like me, she was like doing restaurant jobs too and like different things on this. Ooh, coffee's taking a trip. Um, she's doing different things on the side just like me, and um, it was just hard to build ourselves up, and we both had to like I said, hype each other up and get ourselves to that point. So we've been big inspirations for each other, I'd say. um,
It's like a full circle moment right there. It's
yeah.
like really good. I like
Yeah.
that. We are getting towards the end of the podcast, and I do have that one more question for you. But I wanted to
Uh-huh.
ask you this because I feel like this is like a question that would be worth asking. It's like advice that you'd give to upcoming photographers.
um, I would say just do it. I know that's the Nike's slogan, but um you just gotta kinda gotta dive into it, and, I mean, you're gonna make mistakes in the beginning, but it's accepting that you're gonna make mistakes, that's the big thing. Not trying to be perfect from the get-go, like, just do what you feel is right, and, take photos how you wanna take photos, not how other people are like, of course, get inspiration, but don't just make that the base of your creativity, like, "Oh, I need to shoot this way because this person does." Like, do what you feel is makes you the most comfortable and inspired, and, um, just the first camera you get doesn't need to be, like, super expensive or, like, super techy, like, I'm sure, like, when you started out, I'm sure you didn't get like all your equipment right away. Like you got to start somewhere. So like when I first started out, I just had like this like I had like a Canon camera, but it was like just like 100, $200, like, and I would just learn like simple like point and shoot stuff. And from the beginning too, I'd work with like other photographers. That was a big help too. So like my big advice would be like work with other people, network as much as possible, work with other photographers and see how they work. And um, I mean, you can go to college if you want for it, but I found that I learned a lot from working with other people and just like kind of just diving headfirst into it. I mean, everyone's on their own path, but you can learn a lot yourself and from learning from other photographers and other inspirations. But yeah, Nike, just do
I think that's really great
it.
because, like, I think part of the stuff that I've been working on lately with other podcasters is seeing what they do, how they
Mhm.
do their podcast. And like usually it's different than what I do, but to see all their equipment, see how they open their podcast, to see how they interview, ask questions,
Mm,
it's important to see how other people do what you do
yeah.
because you get to reevaluate what you do.
Mhm.
And you might like something that they do with theirs and add it to yours. You might not like everything they do with theirs,
Yeah.
but you could take something from anyone. And being willing to do that is super important
Mhm.
because if you're not willing to learn from just about anyone, you're probably going to fail. You got to be willing to accept that you can learn something from
Yeah,
anyone.
and don't try to like know everything right away. That was like I wanted to like be like, oh yeah, like I'm proficient in this and proficient in that, and I know everything about Lightroom. I know everything about like all the settings on my like there's stuff you're not gonna know, and you can't act like a big shot like, oh yeah, I know everything. You gotta be humble. I mean, in anything you start doing, you have to be humble with it.
Yeah, for sure. You can't jump out the gate be like,
Yeah.
yo, this is the best
Yeah.
podcast of all time. Like, you guys are in for a treat
Yeah.
today. Like, I mean, you can be. There's
You're
people
not
that do
following
that.
this guy, you're a loser.
like, like you could do that, but I don't know if that's gonna
Yeah. I mean, there's being
work.
confident, and there's being overly confident, just kind of like a douchebag. But
Yeah, there's lines that can't be crossed, and
yeah.
there's obviously people that will cross those. But I think for what we're trying to say here is just being humble is
Mhm.
super important. So we are, like I said, getting towards the end.
Yep.
I have that one question for you. I don't know if it's gonna be too much different than that one, but I'll allow you to still
Okay.
go into it if you want. What would your advice be for someone who wants to pursue their passion?
I'm trying to rephrase it so it's not the same. Here I am. I'm like, I'm not gonna say at all, and I've said probably like 50 times.
You could call back onto it and add to it, whatever you feel most confident. Because obviously, I didn't think about that until after the fact when we were
Yeah.
going through that conversation.
Um, um. Again, Nike, just do it. But stay humble and um, you're not going to get everything right in the beginning. Work with as many people as you can, um, and just keep building yourself and don't compare yourself so much to others. I struggle with that even when it's not photography, not comparing myself to everyone and to influencers, and just you're constantly fed different things on social media. So it's been helpful to just kind of do my own thing and figure out who I am as a person, and then that'll help you kind of figure out what your art is, because you can't really figure out what your art is if you don't know who you are, I guess. I don't know. I've just kind of had to build myself and find out like who I am as a person in order to uh get those expressions out of other people too. Like if I'm super confident and I um super open, then other people can feel like they can be open with me, and then that's how I get those shots of people. And I feel like you just gotta not be an open book essentially, but just like allow the person to be comfortable with you. So to other photographers out there, I would say, you know, don't be afraid to open up, don't be afraid to be vulnerable, but also stay humble.
I think that's really great, and it flows to even stuff that I've mentioned on the podcast
Hmm.
is being open. That's why even the pre-interview I talk about what I do and give a little background. It's giving a piece myself to let you know like how I've created this, who I am, and
Mm,
it's the hope that throughout the podcast you feel comfortable to do so. And I think we've
yeah.
accomplished that goal as we've gone through. And this has been a really great podcast.
Yeah.
If you want to plug your stuff into this camera, I'll allow you to do that.
Okay. Hello. um, Follow me. It's Zest at Zest Zeal Studio. And my website is zestzealstudio.com. And you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook. Maybe eventually I'll be on the TikTokies. And maybe one day I'll have a podcast too, because it's been super cool and super inspirational. But yeah, in my studios in Patuxent Village in Cranston, it's 2007 Broad Street in Cranston, where a really cool place called Art and Soul used to be. And um, yeah, and I do portrait photography, boudoir. Uh, I do weddings, all that fun stuff. So hire your girl, Zest and Zeal Studio LLC.
Perfect. And I appreciate you for being willing to come on the podcast.
Yeah, I
And I know,
appreciate you reaching out too. This is super dope.
yeah, not everyone is always feel so comfortable to do this. So I always like to give praise to people that will. And I just appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. So for you guys though, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, share with your grandma. Check it out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. Also, don't forget to get your Stay Kind to Your Mind hoodies on the Artisan website. Go to his Instagram and check that out and buy those only for the month of May, Mental Health Awareness Month. So, till next time, guys. Peace.